From Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I have a concern. It's not about trade. Quite frankly, trade is one of the things we've done as a nation all along. We were free traders before we were a nation. One of the grievances we had in the Declaration of Independence was the fact that King George was restricting our trade. We've always been individuals in a nation of trade. My issue is particularly with this customs bill that's coming. And again, it's not about the protections in it. It's about the way we pay for it. Now, as odd as it sounds, while we're doing trade and while we're trying to engage in things, we can't lose track of this simple thing called the deficit that's hanging out there as well. We have basic rules on how we actually handle budget issues. Anything that we set out that's going to take several years to pay for, we have basic rules. Those rules involved, it has to be deficit neutral in year 6, and it has to be deficit neutral in year 11. The way that that's set up, and the reason that's set up, is that you can't game the system that way. You can't just backload the whole thing and say, we're going to be deficit neutral in the very last year, but every year of the year we're going to run up the bill and have some pretend pay for at the very end. So the way this is set up is to have this basic gap. Halfway through, you are deficit neutral. At the other end of it, you're also deficit neutral. Well, here's what the customs bill does. The customs bill sets up this unique something called the corporate payment shift. Corporate payment shift. So here's how it works. 6 years from now, every corporation that has $1 billion or more in assets has a 5.25% tax increase in year 6. In year 7, every one of those companies that has $1 billion or more in assets gets a 5.25% tax refund. Now let me run that past you again. This is set up, and the way the bill is written, 6 years from now, taxes go up on every company, that's 2,000 companies in America, that has $1 billion or more in assets by 5.25%. And then the next year, they get a refund of that same amount. Can somebody help me understand exactly why every company in America has to gear up, change the way they do all their tax policies, pay an extra tax that year, and so the next year they can get a refund? That's additional cost, that's additional expense, only to help this body circumvent the basic rules that we've said we're going to abide by. Now, in all likelihood, those companies won't actually do that 6 and 7 years from now, because in all likelihood, next year, this body will come through and will waive the corporate tax shift, because it's now not year 6 and 7, now it's year 7 and 8, and so it doesn't apply. This is ridiculous. This is a problem that this body is playing a game in how we're trying to actually accomplish a basic rule. Now, if anyone can stand up in this body and say, that's a good idea, that we're going to raise taxes 6 years from now on all these companies and refund the same amount in the 7th year, if anyone can tell me that's actually a good idea, please do. All that that's set up to do is to be able to help us in our CBO scoring. So here's what I think we should do. Option number 1, have a real pay for. Not have some pretend and say this is a deficit neutral bill when it's not a deficit neutral bill. We have a $3.7 trillion budget. I think we can find a real pay for to be able to put into this bill. If you're lacking for any of those, my office can give you many options that are real pay fors rather than something fake year 6 and year 7. Here's option number 2. At least admit that this is not a deficit neutral bill and that these pay-fors are fake. There's something this body has called a budget point of order, and it should apply in this sense because this is not a real pay-for. Now, I've had these conversations with staff behind the scenes, with individuals in this body, and I've been told the same thing over and over. This is how we always do it. In other words, you're a new guy here. You don't know this is how the game is played on the budget neutral, deficit eliminating bills that really don't do that. Okay, yes, that's true. I am the new guy here. And I've heard this is an old practice. And it needs to go away. Because no one can defend this. How about this? How about next week I try to go get a car loan and I try to negotiate with the car dealer a 5-year loan. and I tell them I'll pay all of my loan off year 4, but I want a full refund in year 5 for all that I paid off. Do you think I'm going to get that car loan? No, I'm not going to get that car loan because he's going to say that's fake. And I'll say, I paid it off completely year 5. Yep, but we paid it all back in the next year. We've got to be able to actually have real accounting at the end of the day. This is not invisible money. This is debt that's being added. And with a $3.7 trillion budget, we can find real pay-fors. Mr. President, this is a practice that has happened in this Congress and in previous Congresses that has to stop. We have the ability to do that. I have to oppose this bill because it's not genuine in how we're actually paying for it. Saying that we pay for it in year 6 and refunding in year 7 is not real, and we know it. In the days ahead, I hope we can address this practice and not just eliminate it for this bill, but that we can eliminate it from ever being used again in any bill as a gimmick pay for. With that, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.